Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, very glad you're with us for the Wednesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We actually have some good martinis today, which is something we did not officially start the year off with yesterday. We have good, and probably bad/crazy for our third one. One that we've talked about a decent amount over the past month. And actually, it's been less than a month since all of this started, Jim, which is just amazing to me. But it was on December 5th of last year that Claudine Gay, the president of Harvard University, testified before Congress. And she was one of the three college presidents asked by Elise Stefanik about speech promoting genocide on campus. And all three of them said it all depended upon the context. Liz McGill at Penn was the first to go. Then there was a big push for Claudine Gay to be forced out. Harvard decided to keep her. But then on New Year's Day, there were even more allegations. There had already been some in the intervening weeks, but even more allegations and evidence of Claudine Gay plagiarizing her academic work. Hats off to Free Beacon and particularly Aaron Sibarium for being very dogged on that story. So yesterday, Claudine Gay announced her resignation. She'll stay on with the faculty. She'll keep her current salary, which is pretty nice. She did not really
$900,000.
Yes.
It's not quite $1 million, but it's very close.
Yeah, pretty good for getting fired. And at the same time, not really admitting or confessing to much in the letter. The Harvard letter itself was very congratulatory as well, obviously, since they're keeping her on. So, Jim, it was a kind of a double-barreled scandal here. So how surprised are you that the folks at Harvard finally said, yeah, we can't really keep you here anymore?
I am a little bit surprised in that just a couple of days ago, Harvard claimed that it had investigated the plagiarism allegations. Most people said that looked like a whitewash, and but they said, "Oh, this is what they kept using phrases like she had inartfully failed to it was a thing where they used all kinds of word salad to insist that she had not done what was pretty obvious there, that she had committed plagiarism. And the Washington Free Beacon and other places kept finding new examples of this, that this was not a rare isolated incident here and there, that it was proliferating. And of course, would any of this happen without her testimony on Capitol Hill? Probably not. Today's Morning Jolt is all about just the rank dishonesty in what we are been told about Gay's departure from the presidency. As you noted, her resignation letter didn't acknowledge doing anything wrong at all. That in fact was very defensive, very defiant, and no expression of regret, no remorse, no admission of wrongdoing, and only the briefest and vaguest allusion to the nearly 50 cases of alleged plagiarism. But she did say that her critics are, quote, fueled by racial animus, unquote. And the statement from the fellows of Harvard College offered the same sentiment of basically like she's terrific. While President Gay has acknowledged missteps and taken responsibility for them. Now, she didn't say any of the plagiarism stuff, but I suppose in that it was about her congressional testimony. She said, I got caught up in what had become at that point an extended combative exchange about policies and procedures. And that's what made her say that, the genocide of Jews might violate the Harvard rules of bullying and harassment, or it might not, depending on the context. That, presumably that there was some context, some situations in which calling for the genocide of the Jews did not count as bullying in Claudine Gay's mind. And as I put it today's Jolt, Greg, who among us hasn't made that mistake, right? Does, calling for genocide constitute bullying? Seems like the kind of question, like really they should ask you if they're testing you for a concussion. That does not strike me as a terribly difficult, hard call. So this calls attention to her. Points out that she's got a fairly thin record as an academic. I suppose you could say that university presidents don't need to be significant academic scholars. And in the end, they really need to be good managers. But, for being Harvard, they clearly, prize these things. And these things kept adding up, particularly in the cases of the plagiarism. And what I really think was the straw that broke the camel's back. An unnamed but voting member of the Harvard College Honor Council wrote in the Harvard Crimson, the student newspaper, Gay's corrections regarding the plagiarism were not proactive but reactive. She only made them after she was caught. And that Harvard considers her corrections an adequate response is not fair to undergraduates who cannot simply submit corrections to avoid penalties. There is one standard for me and my peers and another much lower standard for our university's president. The corporation should resolve the double standard by demanding her resignation. Now, We don't know if this is how this shook out behind closed doors. But I looked it up. If you want to get not just tuition, I assume you want housing and food. For Harvard, it costs $80,000 a year. $80,000 a year. By the way, I really regret telling you this, Greg, because I know your daughters are really smart. And maybe you're looking at Hillsdale for them. Maybe you don't want them at Harvard, but the brand of Harvard is supposedly excellence and supposedly the best of the best. And if you run around having a president who didn't just commit, plagiarism once or twice, but did nearly 50 times that we know of, and you just hand wave it away, but at the same time you're putting students in academic probation for committing the same, wrongdoing, for the same sin, that's too much even for them to stand. By the way, this argument that she had to resign because the racists were causing her much trouble, this is Harvard University. It's got a $50 billion endowment. It's got 2 of the past 4 presidents, 4 Supreme Court justices right now, about 40 or 50 lawmakers on Capitol Hill, about 40 or 50 current CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. Harvard might be the single most powerful institution in the United States. We could debate about that. Certainly as it ranks up there. And the idea that, we just had so much bad publicity, we had no choice but to, she had to resign even though she did nothing wrong. Horse pucky. We know darn well what she did wrong. And it became untenable for the university. So for that I count as a win. And yes, is the next president probably going to be every bit as left-wing and probably every bit as dedicated to diversity, equity, inclusion, and all that? Yeah. But it's always nice when, the consequences catch up with somebody who's done something wrong and tried really hard to avoid those consequences. So, Greg, I'll count this one as a win.
Okay. Yeah, not sending the Columbus girls to Harvard, spending $80,000 a year for them to end up hating everything we taught them is not a good plan. 2 quick follow-ups here, Jim. First of all, you mentioned her kind of word salad in defending her plagiarism.
It's her own word salad, as far as we know. She did not copy that word salad from. It wasn't an old Kamala Harris speech or anything like that. That's her own incoherence.
Exactly. But since, of course, the people calling it out in this case are the bad guys, according to the mainstream media, not the person who committed the plagiarism, listen to this tortured explanation from CNN's Matt Egan.
These plagiarism allegations, where Claudine Gay has had to issue corrections, multiple corrections. Now, we should note that Claudine Gay has not been accused of stealing anyone's ideas in any of her writings. She's been accused of sort of more like copying other people's writings without attribution. So it's been more sloppy attribution than stealing anyone's ideas.
Copying other people's writings without attribution is not the same as stealing their ideas. Jim, you and I both went to high school. We both went to college. I know you have to sign an honor code when you go to college. I also had to do it in high school. I'm guessing most people do. I can't even remember if we had to do it in junior high, for heaven's sake. But this is drilled into you pretty early on and pretty consistently. And so this sort of defense is just ridiculous.
Yeah, no, copying other people's words without attribution, that's what we call plagiarism. That's pretty clear dictionary definition right there. By the way, just observe, I'm trying to think of a comparable. If a CEO of a company that had donated to Trump and was known for being Republican causes, I just don't envision any network correspondent bending over backwards, say, well, I didn't steal any ideas, and trying to minimize the seriousness of what happened. So I just, the degree to which people will circle the wagons and make excuses and hand wave away genuine wrongdoing is a very big factor in our life. And I think it's a frustrating illustration of the state of affairs in which the elites basically believe that the single most important trait they can have is to demonstrate loyalty to other elites.
Yeah. Now, the way this could, I hate to end on a sour pill on the good martini, but the way I think a lot of these liberal institutions are going to interpret the controversy over what speech is allowed on campus, because the left thinks certain speech on the right is violence, right? Speech is violence, but their violence is just speech. So when pro-life or people who think that, biological men shouldn't be in women's sports or whatever the issue is, that speech, I think, is going to be very unkindly looked upon by the left-wing heads of institutions when that type of speech comes up on campus. I fear that that's coming as a result of this particular scandal, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is some degree of, the response will be, how do we stop the people from publishing things that make our side look bad? Not how do we get the people on our side to stop doing bad things.
Time now to tell you about our fantastic sponsor for the day, and that is 4Patriots, makers of so many great products, and you can find all of them at 4patriots.com/martini. You know about the Patriot Power Generator 2000X, which will charge more devices for longer during a blackout, double the capacity and more peak power than ever before. Make sure that fridge, freezer, medical devices, and so much more is ready to go, and it never needs gas ever. Comes with a solar panel. Also, the survival food kits. They're delicious with the real meat and vegetables, designed to last for 25 years. But also make sure you don't miss the deals this week at 4patriots.com/martini. You got the Halo XT Tactical Solar Flashlight 4-pack, only $119. You can also get the Starfire Camp Stove. Buy 3, get 1 free. Visit 4patriots.com/martini to see this week's discounts and deals before they are gone, and get free shipping on orders over $97. Save more and get peace of mind now by going to the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's 4patriots.com/martini. All right, Jim, time for our second martini, mostly good. This is courtesy of a poll from USA Today, but run by Suffolk University. And the good news is that Joe Biden is still deeply unpopular as he begins this re-election year. And so, first of all, among minorities, 63% of black voters support the president, compared with the 87% of the group he won in 2020. Now, that number generally tends to bump up when the actual vote happens, but still needs to be a little bit worrisome for the Biden folks. Trump also tops Biden among Hispanic voters, 39-34. That continues a trend we've seen for the last few cycles. So Biden's sieve at the southern border is certainly not doing anything to win over Latino voters, and I don't know why Democrats think it does. Latinos like law and order as much as anybody else. And here's the interesting one, Jim. Voters ages 18-34, Trump allegedly leads 37-33. I think the interesting thing there could be frustration with the policy towards Israel and Hamas, or also just the fact that young people can't afford much these days, given interest rate hikes and the general rise in prices overall in the past few years. Also, last point, 20% of all three of those groups chose third-party candidates over either Trump or Biden. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or any no-labels candidate might be looking a little better than we thought.
So, look, if you're Biden, these numbers should be sending a chill down your spine. But, old people get chilly anyway, so maybe it won't be noticed. So one of the things that kind of and I suppose if you're on the Trump campaign, if you want Republicans to win in 2024, there is a faint, every dark cloud has a silver lining. Every silver cloud has a dark lining. These are people who voted for Biden in the past and who probably wouldn't take too much pushing to vote for Biden again. I think you're right. I think that the Israel-Palestine issue is one that's hurting many young people. Look, I can't help but get the feeling, and Politico has a big story on Charlemagne the God, who's a morning radio talk show host. This is the one where Biden had the inference where, if you ain't voting for me, you ain't black, during the 2020 election cycle. And Joe Biden has always had this, what strikes me as cringe-inducing presumptuousness, particularly when he talks about racial issues. And, you may recall that when he was on Jimmy Kimmel, he started rambling about interracial couples and commercials on TV. His, just utterly obnoxious thing when he said to an Indian American guy at a conference, you can't go into a 7-Eleven unless you have a slight Indian accent. There's just something about, people, certain folks on the right will say, this says, shows you Joe Biden is racist. Joe Biden is 81 years old and just says and does things that just aren't considered acceptable anymore. They're considered kind of insulting and kind of, obnoxious and presumptuous. And he walks around thinking he has more credibility with these communities. He always tells the story about, really, I was raised in the synagogues and, I was practically raised. We've all heard this, and maybe in some past era, people found it charming. I think in the culture of 2024, it's just seen as, at best, ham-handed pandering. And so, no, Mr. President, I don't think they relate to you. And I think that minorities and young people, hey, they got to buy stuff too. So they notice high prices. It's not like they even. And I don't know if minorities and young people love having an open border. Maybe you see, stronger feelings amongst other demographics. But, they see the same effects of it. There's a reason Democratic blue state mayors, often minorities themselves, are saying we can't handle anymore. Our resources are squeezed to the limit. We can't handle, people notice these problems. So I just think that Biden, both on this, these demographics and just in general, walks around in this cloud of extremely high self-regard and convinces himself. And when he gets caught, you see these in his comments, cover it right, and you're reading the wrong polls. And, Biden's convinced he's doing great. And I don't think he is. I think it's pretty straightforward. I think we've now seen abundant polling evidence. And I suspect one of the reasons that Democrats are so nervous is that the Biden White House keeps telling them, trust us, everything is going to be fine. And look, maybe Trump is sufficiently unpopular that everybody remembers why they voted against him in 2020, and they feel motivated to come out and vote again in 2024. But you'd rather have a good, strong, effectively communicating president who's preferably not an octogenarian to go into that election year battle. And Democrats just don't have that.
The only good number in this poll for Biden, other than confidence in the economy ticking up but still under 30%, is that while he's at 38%, Kamala Harris is at 33%. So no matter how unpopular he gets, his option number 2 is even less popular. So that, I guess, gives him a little bit more support going into the general election, since they don't have an obvious replacement. Although there's quite a few who would like to be, but doesn't look like they're going to pull that trigger yet. All right, Jim, on to our bad/crazy martini. And, what would a new year be without news of another significant indictment, but somebody who's already been indicted many times before, and that's New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez, hit with new charges, this time not related to Egypt. This time it's about Qatar or Qatar, depending on how you pronounce it, but very similar details. This is from CNN. The latest indictment alleges Menendez introduced real estate developer Fred Davies, who is part of the other scandal, who was seeking an investment, to a member of the Qatari royal family and principal of the Qatari investment company. While the Qatari investment fund was weighing an investment, Menendez made multiple statements in public supporting the government of Qatar. Quote, Menendez provided Davies with these statements so that Davies could share them with the Qatari investor and Qatari government officials associated with the Qatari investment company. That's a lot of Qataris. In August 2021, the senator sent a press release in which he praised the Qatari government to Davies, texting him, "You might want to send to them. I am just about to release this," the indictment alleges. The following month, after attending a private event hosted by the Qatari government, Davies texted Menendez photographs of luxury watches valued as much as $23,990, asking, "How about one of these?" But it's not just watches. Yes, there's more gold bars. And this time it's even more entertaining in addition to criminal. Nadine Menendez, his wife, met with Davies several months later in March 2022. After that lunch meeting, she texted him, "Thank you, Fred," along with some emojis. The next day, she showed up at the jeweler with 2 1-kilo gold bars worth about $60,000 each. So she just walked into the jeweler and slapped down a gold bar like she's from Pirates of the Caribbean. So what do we make of this?
So the first thing, when you mentioned this as a potential news story today, I went and I checked. Bob Menendez is still a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Mm-hmm. He stepped down as chairman, but he's still on the committee. I'm not sure, as his fellow Democratic Senator John Fetterman keeps reminding people, he still has access to classified briefings. Not sure if he's necessarily attended any, but this is a guy who's accused of being a foreign agent, and we have not cut off his access to classified information? Really? I understand you're innocent until proven guilty. And, people have called on him to resign. More than half the Democrats in the Senate have called on him to resign. It's not, he's not resigning. And once again, we see the Ralph Northam playbook. Well, we called on him to resign, and he said no, so there's nothing more we can do about it. Oh, well, time to move on. Mentality at work there. At minimum, can we get him off the Foreign Relations Committee? Is that too much to ask? Can we say, classified briefings are a privilege. They're not a right. He has no constitutional right to keep attending these briefings. He doesn't have a right to be on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I mean, the allegations against this guy keep getting worse and worse. And other than John Fetterman, ironically, more than the Republicans, nobody seems to be all upset about this. And it's the second time he's been up on allegations like this. Lucked out with a hung jury in the last one. Why is this, So anyway, this is one of those stories where you look at it And you just kind of marvel. And I keep hearing from like people on, left of center folks on Twitter, Jim, Democrats hate Menendez and Democrats aren't defending. Well, okay, but they're not defending him. They're not really lifting any fingers to get him nudged out there. And, you could argue if this was a sketchy indictment, if this was something like, this really looks like a ticky-tack violation of some obscure regulation like that. That'd be one thing. Look, gold bars are everywhere. What is the innocent explanation that that explains everything that happened? The only thing Bob Menendez has said is everybody's out to get me. It's a vast right-wing conspiracy. Lord knows we've heard that plenty of times. So I look at that like, okay, the guy's guilty as sin. And even if he's not guilty as sin, you're innocent until proven guilty is a concept for the courtroom criminal charges. There's nothing that says you are guaranteed to keep your Senate seat, no matter what allegations pile up against you. And you sure as heck shouldn't keep having access to classified information when you've been accused of passing along sensitive information. So anyway, that's where we are with things, Greg. Who would have figured that only John Fetterman wanted to lead this crusade?
So Ben Cardin's the chair, Chuck Schumer's the majority leader. Can either of those guys do it unilaterally, or do you have to vote on it like the House did when they were stripping Adam Schiff and
I imagine, the first step would be Schumer or somebody comes along and says, well, first of all, I don't think Cardin really wants to give anybody grief about anything. Senator Menendez, my entire staff says your behavior is unacceptable. I think that's just not going to. Won't pass the laugh test. But Schumer conceivably could go up and say, Bob, it's time to go. I've got to go from the committee at least. We can't, keep you on here. We'll see how, that would be the first step is you try to handle it behind the scenes. And then if it does, maybe Schumer's afraid. Maybe Schumer, that yes, more than half of the Senate Democrats have issued statements saying you should resign. But maybe the rest of the Senate Democrats don't want to touch this issue with a 10-foot pole. Maybe they owe Menendez favors. Maybe they want to stay on his good side. Maybe they just don't want to deal with it. That's what I'm saying. Like it's one thing for Democrats to say, this sounds really bad. He should go. It's another thing to do anything about it. And so far, only Fetterman is really willing to bang the drums on this.
Yeah, a quote here from the Menendez attorney, a guy named Adam Fee, says the new allegations stink of desperation. Despite what they've touted in press releases, the government does not have the proof to back up any of the old or new allegations against Senator Menendez. And he says they're turning it into a persecution, not a prosecution. So
what's the innocent explanation for everybody walking around with all these gold bars?
Jim, the inflation we're facing in this country due to the devaluation of the dollar makes it only a sane approach to base your wealth in gold. Come on.
Just saw a lot of old commercials on various cable news channels. Yeah.
Jim, hey, at least we got a couple of good ones in today. I think we're back to average. See you tomorrow.
All right, sounds good.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please subscribe to the podcast if you don't already, and tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. They really do help us out. Get us also on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch Podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Wednesday, and join us again on Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.